Yo, what is going on, guys? JC here, and welcome back to another DayZ video. What we're going to be doing in today's video is going to be quite a long one, so buckle down. But we're going to go over everything you need to know about running a DayZ server and all of what the DayZ files actually do. Be warned, this is going to be quite a bit of a long video, but what I'll do is I'm going to break everything up into like a table of contents type ideal. That way, if you don't need a section, you can skip to it, or you can skip right to the section that you actually may have questions on. But I get a lot of questions in the Discord about certain files and how to edit certain things. So I just figured, you know what, let's just do one long video and we're going to go over everything. Instead of having, like 20 broken up 5-minute videos, I'm just going to do everything in one shot. So hopefully you guys enjoy this. Hopefully it really helps, but we're going to get right on into it. So if you're just now coming and you just want to create your own DayZ server, the video that what we're going to be talking about today will work for both console servers and for PC servers. There are some things that we're going to go over that are PC only. Basically, the init file. The init file is something that only the PC servers have at this time. So, a console server can't really do that. But we're going to just go over everything. So whether you're on console or you're on PC, this video may help you. So first things first, we're going to jump into a test server that I have here. If you guys are looking for, this is a quick little plug. If you're looking to get your own DayZ servers, PC servers at the time, MWGSM offers a great, reliable and cheap service. You should definitely check them out. Use my code. I'll have the code in the description, but Gamingwithjc will get you 10% off your service. Great servers, super fast. I just wanted to do that little plug. If you want to host your own server, get them from here. So we have a fresh server. No mods have been installed whatsoever. This is just like a complete blank server. So let's get into our file manager, and we're just going to go over a Chernarus mission set. Just pretty much this is what everyone's going to have. So starting over this, the AreaFlags.map. This is a map file that contains all of your territories, where your territories are painted, where your tier sets are painted, all of that. You can't access this. You could open it. You're not going to be able to open this. This AreaFlags.map file needs to be opened through DayZ tools. And it can be opened in basically the economy editor. And this is how you can change everything. You can change your tiers. You can change where your territories are. You can move your zombies. You can do the whole nine. This can be done on both a PC and a console server. It requires you to have DayZ tools to actually go in and edit the economy file, essentially. So the area flags that's all this controls. This is going to control where the zombies are, the wolves, where your tier system is, where your gas zones are for the gas loot only. We're going to get into gas zones a little bit later, but this will, like, if you want to paint a new contaminated area and say for instance you want to move the gas zone from Riffy to Northwest Airfield, you would actually have to go into your area flags and you would have to remove the paint from Riffy, and you would have to put that paint on Northwest Airfield. We're not going to go over painting a map today, because that's a whole video in itself, but that's basically what this file is for. Your CfgeconomyCore, this is just basically your economy stuff. You don't need to edit anything in here, and you typically, even if you're modding, you really don't need to add anything to this. Essentially, this one really shouldn't get touched. The only time you're going to ever mess with your economy core is if you want to create basically a CE file for your typed files, which I have a video that I've already done on that. I'll link that below. But other than that, you're never really going to mess around with the economy core file. Moving to your area effect JSON. So this is what controls where your gas is, your static gas zones. All right, not your dynamic gas zones, but your static gas zones. So being that we're looking at a Chernars file, you'll see this is the ship Southwest, ship Northeast, ship Central, and then you've got Pavlovo. So this is the Chernars version. So say I wanted to move my gas and we wanted to get rid of Riffy and we wanted to move this to the Northwest Airfield. So what you would just do is you would just come into iSurvive. Let's go to a Chernars Plus map. Let's move this over here. So here's our gas zone currently. As you can see, we have the 3 sectors of gas. You would basically just want to come over to Northwest Airfield. Where's it at? Here it is. And you would, so you come right here. It looks like we've got 4807, 97. You know, you would just basically grab your coordinates and then you would put them in here. Now you have your radius. So this is a circular radius as to how far in meters, how far the gas is. You don't want one ginormous gas zone, because if you were to like put it right here in the center, and I mean, you would have to go like, you know, 600-700 meters to reach over here, which would end up being like, it would just be one massive circle. You don't want that. So you're going to have to do smaller circles. So that's what this radius is. And that's all just trial and error as to how far your radius actually is. Your position height, that's how high or how thick the layer is. Same with the negative height. That's how low it goes into the ground. Then you have your inner ring count, your inner particle distances, which is basically how far off, you know, when you go in there, how thick is it? If you want it super thick, if you want it super thin, so on and so forth. The particle name, you can actually change what the gas looks like. If you go into your graphics and your particles, there's actually a whole list of graphics and particles that are already in the base game. So if you wanted your gas zone to be, for instance, white, you can make it, you know, a white gas, but you can go into the graphics and find all of that yourself. I'm just wanting to explain what the file actually does. If we scroll down, your safe positions. So what these are is if you log into a gas zone or if you get kicked out of a gas zone, these are the positions that it could actually teleport you to. So for instance, if you wanted to change Riffy and you no longer want this to be a gas zone and you wanted it to be Northwest Airfield, you would have to come down here and you would have to find the coordinates that are next to Riffy, and you would have to change these to coordinates that are considered a safe zone for this area, if that makes any sense. So getting out of the gas, moving on to the environment. This is another one that on a console, you'll never have to change. But on a PC, if you want to add custom animals or custom territories, like say, for instance, for a mod, you want to add the DayZ squirrel or the DayZ rat or whatever the case may be. This is basically the directory of where it reads the territory file. So from your environment folder, where all your territories are, this actually tells us what type of file to read, what it's for, and which territory to read. So console, you'll never have to change this. PC, you will, if you ever want to add in modded animals, or if you wanted to ever add in a modded animal and have its own territory, you'll definitely have to you'll have to basically edit this file to call out your territories. Otherwise, you know, whatever you put in your environment folder, it won't even read these. So if you want it to read these, then you're going to have to edit your environment folder. The event groups. So this is the new thing that they added a couple patches ago, but these are your trains, like your abandoned trains, your convoys, all this kind of good stuff. So what this does is you have a group and then you have a child line. Okay. So the child line is the item. This is the item that it's spawning. And then as you can see, we have a loot max and a loot min. And then these are the positions of which the items are actually laying. So if you wanted to basically create your own custom area with your own custom train accident, you would literally just copy this. This can be done on console and PC. You would just copy this. You would create, you would come down here. You would create a new one. you would name it, you know, train accident, just custom area, whatever your name is. And then you would need to go in and basically in like DayZ editor or something of the sort, you would place the items the way you want the train wreck to actually be. And then you would just paste those items into here, paste the item names, and then you would have your X's, your Y's, you know, your A is the rotation, your Y is the height, then your, you know, your X and your Z coordinates. And you can basically build it out. If you wanted these train wagons to have more loot, then you would just come here and you would put this to a 5. So now it could have up to 5 items in it. And, you know, we put this to a 4. So now this train wagon right here at this location can have 5 items with a minimum of 4 versus 3 with a minimum of 2. So that's what this file is. This file contains all of your little event groups that happen. Your event spawns are, you know, pretty self-explanatory. If you were to want to change your vehicle spawns, or for instance, if you were to add modded vehicles and you didn't want them to be like a child of your civilian sedans and you wanted to add their own, this is where you would add your event spawns. So if you wanted to, like, for instance, put your Christmas trees in a different place, then you would have to go into game or into editor, place the Christmas tree. You're going to get your position and your Z. The A again is always, this is always rotation. Christmas trees don't really matter, but, you know, car crashes or, you know, vehicles that you can loot kind of do matter, because if you put them in a spot, you don't want it rotated like into a building. So you would want this rotation line as well. But that's basically what this is. This is just where your events are actually going to spawn. So for instance, we'll go into Sakal real quick. Let's come down in here to offline Sakal. Let's come into our event spawns. So by default, Sakal has no, they don't have any heli crashes, right? So you're like, okay, well, say we want heli crashes on here. The reason why they don't have heli crashes is because they have these little loot boxes, right? They're like basically in the, I think they're in the, what are they called? They're right here, the static military container specials. So these are like basically the little events for Sakal. You know, you go around the map, you loot the containers. That's your DE loot essentially. Well, if you wanted to add helicopter crashes to this, it's actually very simple to do. So all you would need to do is you would come to basically a, you know, Chinaris file set eventually, or essentially you would come down here to the event spawns. Let's just Control F heli to make it faster. So here's your heli crashes. You would basically just grab this, copy it. You would come over to your Sakal one. You would just put it anywhere you wanted to. You know, you could just put it up here at the top. Doesn't really matter. And then you would need to go in game and basically just change your positions. That's all you need to do. Keep in mind, if it is an event, you do not have to call out a Y coordinate. The only time you ever will need to call out a Y coordinate for an event is because the events automatically snap to the terrain. The only time you would ever need to call out a Y coordinate for an event is if you have a custom area. Say you've built like a custom oil rig out in the ocean and you want a helicopter crash to spawn on top of that oil rig. Well, then you're going to actually have to put a Y coordinate in there to determine that it's going to spawn on top of the oil rig instead of going to the bottom of the ocean. And to do that is very simple. You would literally just do, you know, Y equals parentheses, I don't know, say 145.6, not parentheses, quotation marks, space, and then there you go. So now for this particular helicopter, it's going to spawn at this Y coordinate, and you're going to need this Y coordinate. If, like I said, if you're trying to spawn it on top of something. If not, and you're just using just basically the terrain, then you do not need this Y coordinate whatsoever. And that's pretty much what your event spawns actually do. Coming into the CFG gameplay file, this is a very, very important file. A lot of things are changed in here. So this file is going to basically control everything that happens with the server. So if you want to disable base damage, you would just make this true. You come on down to your player data. If you don't want that little annoying white light around you, you disable it. You would make this true. Your stamina. So here's your sprint stamina modifier. So at a 1, while you're sprinting, your stamina is going down at a normal rate. If you were to set this to a 0.5, well, now it's going to drain at the half of the rate. If you were to do this at a 0.01, you could literally sprint for days and your stamina would hardly ever go down. Same thing here while you're crouching. So if you wanted to, while you're crouch running, if you were to just do like 0.01, your guy could crouch sprint forever. The stamina weight limit threshold, you really don't need to ever change this. Stamina max, you don't need to change. So this right here is how the stamina to stamina percent penalty, stamina kg to stamina. So this is like, okay, so if something weighs 5 kilograms, it's going to take 1.75 times that weight from your stamina. So if you want things to essentially weigh pretty much nothing, you could just set this to like 0.0001. And no matter how much crap you have on you, it's not going to weigh anything, if that makes any sense. Again, you have a modifier for your sprint swimming, your ladders, your melee. If you want your melee to take no swing or no stamina from you whatsoever, 0.001, you just kind of, it's just a decimal. You can't, I don't know this for sure. I've never done a 0.0. I don't know if that would actually work. It's worth testing. I've never done values like this because I kind of always done more of like the vanilla style servers, but I know you can adjust it this way. Same thing goes for the hold breath. If you want to hold your breath with a sniper rifle, 0. Just a bunch of zeros and a 1, you could just hold your breath for days. The shock handling data is the same thing. This is about how many hits you can take before you're unconscious, blah, blah, blah. Your movement data, this is your inertia. So they added inertia a while ago, and a lot of people didn't like it at first. Honestly, I'm kind of used to it now. When I play on a server that doesn't have the inertia, it kind of makes me like motion sickness. But your time to strafe, your rotation speed, you can turn all of these values to just very minimal, and you'll basically have no inertia whatsoever. So here's your world's data. So your lighting config, this is going to be, 0 for what is it? 0 is bright nights, 1 is dark nights. Then they added this third one, which is a 2, which is kind of like overcasty bright nights. So this would change basically your, the how dark your nights are. If you want it to be vanilla dark where it's pitch black, you would set this to a 1. If you want it to be very bright at night, you set it to a 0. Or if you want it kind of in the middle, you set it to a 2, which is basically the default Chinar's version. Then you've got your environment temps. So these are done in months. All right. So there's 12 temps, January, February, March, April, so on and so forth. And then you have your max temps. So this is for Sakal is actually what we're doing right now. I didn't even realize we were in Sakal's, but we're in Sakal's. So in January, the minimum temp it can be is negative 6.5 degrees Celsius. So keep in mind that these numbers are in Celsius. So that's the minimum it can be. The maximum it could be is negative 3 degrees Celsius, which if you think about it is really freaking cold. But it's a snow map. It's supposed to be cold. If you wanted it to match the temperatures of, say, what is this? January, February, March, April, May, June, July, August, which would probably be the hottest month, 17 to 10, you could just change the temperatures here. So if it's too cold for you, or if it's too hot for you in your months, you could come here, you adjust this, and you can control how cold your map is or how hot your map is. The wetness modifiers is, of course, the more you're wet, the more stamina, the more you're weighed down. If you don't like that, you can just kind of just set all this to 0.0, or you can just kind of keep it default Like I said, I mainly do vanilla style servers. So if you're wet, you're going to be heavier by default, so on and so forth. Player restricted area files, the warhead storage JSON. So basically this is like no build zones. So if we were to open up this PRA warhead storage.json, it'll probably tell us we can't install, you know, these types of kits down there. It's so you can't build a base basically under that area. This is a really good one for console. There are mods for PC that you can do this. I feel it's a useless mod because you could basically do everything right here. So disable is colliding box check. If you want basically build anywhere, if you want to be able to put your tents on any terrain, it doesn't have to be super flat. If you want to be able to put tents inside of buildings, then you're going to go through and you're going to start messing around with these right here. So disable is colliding box check. You would set this to true. And that way, if your basically your little hologram that you place down, if it's colliding with another box, it won't let you place. But if you disable it, it will let you place it. Same here with like the player. So sometimes you're trying to place an item and it's like your buddy's standing there, or it's like hitting your character itself. If you want to disable that little colliding check, you just hit true. If you want to be able to put flagpoles inside of houses, disable is clipping roof check. You would set this to true. This would allow your flagpole to go up through the roof and it's going to be perfectly fine. Disable base viable check. Again, you would set this to true. The only thing that in here that you would never want to set to true is your disable colliding plot check. So if you set this to true right here, this main one, what it will allow is for you to take a farm plot and you could literally stack them on top of each other and you could glitch raid. So you don't ever want to set this one to true. You always want this one to be false. You always want to be able to put your farming plots in grass. You don't want them in the middle of the road. This right here will allow you to basically put a farm plot anywhere. You can put it on top of a roof. You can stack them on top of each other, which they have collision, so you can just walk on them. You never want to set this one to true. And then of course, they're all pretty much self-explanatory. Colliding the angle check is placement permitted check here. Height placement check, underwater, in terrain. So here's a good one, like if you're trying to place tents anywhere. Well, if you know, most of these maps are very hilly and you don't want to find a flat spot, you would disable in terrain and it would basically let you place your tent anywhere. Now be careful when doing this, when placing your tent, because if the back right section of it is actually in the ground, you won't be able to grab that little hook point to pack your tent, and then your tent's just basically stuck there forever until an admin, you know, goes in and actually deletes it or removes it. So be careful when using this. It's very, very handy, you know, when you have a very hilly terrain and you want to like basically put tents out in the woods somewhere. Just be mindful when you're actually placing your tent, because if you, like I said, if that little hook point, that little grab section is in the ground, you won't be able to pack your tent again. So your construction data, you always just kind of want to leave this alone, but it's pretty self-explanatory. Disable perform roof check. If you want to make sure it doesn't have a roof, or it doesn't care if it doesn't have a roof, you know, you would just set this to true. And then here's your map. So your map data, use 3D map. So whenever you go to open your map, if you don't want it to be a full screen map and you want to use that little 3D version of the map, you would just set this to true. Me personally, I don't like that, but some people do, some people don't. The hit indicators. So these are the little things when your guy gets hit, how it puts the little red marks on your screen. This is how you can change what those little marks are. And this is how you can change if you want those little marks whatsoever. So hit direction behavior, if you want it turned off, so you would have to turn your override on to true. And then if you wanted to turn it off, you don't have it. You don't want it. So you can, there's actually a lot of different little indicators that you can hit. The little splatter, some look like a red splatter. You can change the color of it. Here's the color code right here. If you want it to be black, purple, blue, whatever you want to do. You can change the color of that right here, but this right here, this hit indication data, this is how you would override that if you don't like it. And then we've got the map data. So ignore map ownership. This is by default true. So ignore nav item ownership. So if you want people to open up their maps and not need a GPS to show their location, you would just set this to true. So this is basically the console's way of having the PC just hit M for map, and you've got a map, shows your location and what stuff, whatnot. If you want that for your console server, then you would basically ignore map ownership. We would turn this to true, and then you would ignore nav items ownership, turn that to true. Then display player position is yes, display navigation info is yes. So if you want them to have the GPS, then you would just set this back to false. If you want them to have a map, the same thing, you would just set this to false, and so on and so forth. And that's pretty much the gameplay JSON file. Moving down to the ignore list. So what this does is every time the server restarts, if an item is in here, it will not spawn another. So this is a really good thing for like Christmas gifts. So if you'll notice, if you manually place Christmas trees, right, and you have the Christmas trees that they have gifts on the ground. Well, if you want them to, say there's no one hits that tree for that whole server restart, if you don't want them to keep spawning gifts on top of each other, you need to add them to this list. So you would just basically take this HESCO box, type name here, and then you would just do, gift, I think it's _large 1. And then you would have to do the same thing with gift large 2, and then gift small 1, so on and so forth. If it's in here, it will not keep spawning. This is good for like BBP. So for those people who have BBP and you go through and you set all of your cement mixers through BBP, well, after so many restarts, those will just keep spawning on top of each other. So you would actually have to come in here and add this as a, let's see, cement mixer. You would actually have to add like BBP cement mixer. I'm not exactly sure what the type name is. I'm just kind of going off of here, my brain. But you would actually have to add this to your ignore list. That way, when the server restarted, it would not spawn another one of these. So keep that in mind. That's what this file is for. This will make sure that on server restarts, it doesn't just keep spawning the item. That's why the helicopter crash is here. That way on a server restart, all of the helicopter crashes that were there, they stay there and they don't just spawn another one. So that's what this file is all about. This is basically just so your server just doesn't keep spawning stuff on top of things. Coming down to the limits definition. So this is something that has to do when it comes to painting as well. So if you wanted to paint a new area, you wanted to make a tier 5, well, you would go into the economy editor, you would paint your map, add a tier 5 color. You would actually have to come down here to your value flags and you would have to create a new tier. Otherwise the economy won't recognize it. So you would have to come in here and you would have to make a tier 5 like so. But this basically will tell you all of the categories that are on your map, the tags that you can use, the usage flags that you could use, and the value flags. So this is a really good indication of where things can spawn and what things are actually being used for whatever map you're on. So that's what this is. Again, the only time you would really edit this file is if you're painting a new map and you're changing where, you're adding tiers, you're adding usage flags, you're adding tags. You would never add a tag. But you could add new categories. If you wanted to create a category, for instance, I don't know, category will be test. And then in your types files, you want to change the category from explosive to tests. Well, then you would add that right on in here. And then of course, in your types files, you would have to set the item to spawn on that category instead, so on and so forth. But that's what the limits definition is. Limits definition user is the same thing. So if you were to set an item instead of having, so this, John McClane did this a lot, or not, I'm sorry, not John McClane. Namalsk, Cermak did this a lot. So as you can see, if you do username is tier 1234, so tier 1234, what that does is it's all of the tiers together. So if we were to go to our types files and we were to put an AK101, and for the user flag, if we were to type in tier 1234, well, then all we would end up doing is that item would go to all 4 tiers. I don't really care to do it this way. I would rather just do tier 1, 2, 3, and 4, you know, and just basically have the tier systems that I want. But if you really wanted to do it this way, you could. And the limits definition user basically shows you how to do it. So for instance, say you had up to a tier 5. All right, you added a tier 5. You could call this one tier 45, and then you could set this to where this will spawn in tier 4 and in tier 5. So now in your type files, if you ever did a tier 45, it would basically spawn in 4 and in 5, so on and so forth. Player spawn points is pretty self-explanatory. For a private server, for a community server, every time you join a new community server, you start as a fresh spawn anyways. So you really don't need the hopping ones. You'll have some that are like hop. But if you wanted your guy to basically spawn in a new time, like every time someone spawns in, if you for some reason you wanted them to spawn in a new position, then you would come in here and you could change some of these. This is very self-explanatory. They've done a good job with explaining how this works, but essentially, let's come up to the very top one right here. This first one is where you're going to basically be spawning. Like these are your spawn points. So if you wanted to go through and change your spawn points and make custom spawn points or add player spawn points, you would just do it here in this little first block, because these are your fresh spawn points. These are your hop spawn points. So if you were to be like server hopping, these are basically like the vanilla, the official servers. You know, if you jump between official servers, how it moves your position. These are the spawn points that you would basically choose if you were to be hopping servers. But like I said, on a community server, it's never going to happen. Everything is basically going to be this first block right here, which are your fresh player spawn points. Coming down to the random presets. So the random presets controls the loot in a sense. So you have your food hermit. So there's a 15% chance for a food hermit. So we'll get into this down in the spawnable types. Basically controls what zombies have this food type on them. But if you wanted to increase the amount of food that's on your, you know, that the food that's on the zombies or the loot that's on the zombies, this is how you do it. So by default, there's a 15% chance for food to be on a hermit. And then it goes a little bit further. So out of that 15% chance, you have an 11% chance for it to be tuna, 11% chance for it to be sardines, and then you have a 7% chance for it to be an apple. If you wanted every single hermit zombie to drop loot, then you would just set that to a 1.0. And then of course it would go between these sections. So if you wanted it to be a 100% chance to drop food hermit, but you wanted tuna or you wanted an apple to be much higher than these two, then you would set this to like, I don't know, 0.50. So now there's a 50% chance it's going to be this. And then there's only an 11% chance that it's going to be this, you know, a tuna or a sardines can. And another thing that you can do is say the food hermit right now, he's only dropping tuna, sardines, and an apple. Well, say you wanted him to drop sardines, peaches, spaghetti, and baked beans. All you need to do is copy these and then just place them here. So now the food hermit also has a chance to drop baked beans, peaches, and spaghettis. If we come on down, this can be done on both console and PC servers. But say you wanted, you know, the civil guys, the ammo civil, you wanted them to drop more ammo. Well, then you would just set this to a 1.00 Well, now it's 100% chance that they're going to drop, you know, the zombies would drop ammo civil. We're not going to do this, but yeah, that's, I would never have it 100% drop, but you could bump it up to, you know, say a 0.45. So now there's a 45% chance that, you know, whatever's tagged ammo civil will actually drop ammo on the zombies. The best thing for this though is if say, you know, for a PC server, if say you have, you know, modded items and you have backpacks and you want the zombies to be wearing different backpacks. Well, you come right here. So here's our bags village. Say you have Spurgle's bags. So you would do like spur underscore lone wanderers. I don't know, purple. I'm just going, like I said, I'm just going off memory here. I don't know exactly what the bag's called, but you would change this or just add it to it. And then your zombies will have a chance to be wearing your modded items. That's what this is. Same thing goes for instance, let's go to our bags for armies. So we all know that the ghillie suit takes up a backpack slot, right? So this duffel bag small. So say we wanted our zombies, our military zombies to have a chance to be wearing ghillie suits. Well, then we would literally just change this to the ghillie suit underscore tan. Not that, it's gotta be underscore tan. Well, now he's gonna have the, you know, a regular zombie from the military will have a chance to, he'll have a 10% chance to be wearing a ghillie suit. But keep in mind, this is the actual attachment chance. So there's only a 15% chance for this zombie to be wearing something, or a backpack at least. And then out of that 15% chance, there's more, you know, much further percentages breakdown of what it wants. So if you wanted it to be only ghillie suits, well, then you would just set the ghillie suit, you know, to a 100% and then set this to a 100%. And then every of your military zombies will be wearing a ghillie suit. Do I say do that? Absolutely not, but that's just how you can change that. And that's basically what the random presets is. You can control what zombies have on them and how much loot the zombies actually drop. It's all done in this file right here. Now, tagging off of that, if we come into our spawnable types, so let's just go to ammo civil, because that's what we were looking at. Oh, my bad. It's going to be in here. So here's your type name. So your Tulum bag violet. This is also going to control what is spawning inside the items. So child bag blue will have the cargo set food village. So if we come back to our random presets and we control F food village. So inside of a child bag, it has the chance to drop these items right here. That's basically what your spawnable types is. This is going to control what spawns on what. So if you find a plate carrier vest and you want there to be a plate carrier holster on them 100% of the time, your attachment chance would be a 1.00. So basically every time you find a plate carrier vest underscore black, it's going to have both of these attachments on it 100% of the time. Same thing goes with, I don't know. Let's see here. Let's find another good example. The canvas bag. If you want the canvas bag to always have a bandage in it, then you're going to set your chance to a 1.0. If you want it to always have an iodine in it, 1.0. If you want it to always be, you know, always have antibiotics, 1.0. Same thing with the vitamins, 1.0. So now every time you find a canvas bag medical, it's going to have all of these items in it 100% of the time. The ammo box, again, the spawnable types controls how much items or how much loot is inside of an item or what spawns on top of the item. So if we come to like an M4A1, for instance, so there's an attachment chance of 100%. And on this attachment is the buttstock. It's a 100% chance. But now if you come down here to, you know, the plastic guards, 100%, the optic, there's a 100% chance for an optic to spawn. And it's either A, going to be a carry handle, or B, it's going to be this BUIS optic. Well, if you wanted to set this to a 0.50, that way it's a, you know, 0.50%, 0.50%. Well, now you're going to have, it's a 50% chance of either one of these items. Here's your magazines. So they don't always come loaded with mags. If you want your guns to always have a magazine in them, you're going to set this to a 1.00. Now your M4 will always spawn with a magazine. And then you can further change it by, in these percentages, of what magazine is actually going to have. Same thing goes with the FAL. If you want the FAL to always have a magazine, you're just going to set this to a 1.00. Now your FALs on your map will always have a mag in it. Your attachment chances, these are basically, like I said, the attachments that are on the gun. That's what controls this. Same thing goes with vehicles. So if you want your vehicles to spawn fully built, your item, civilian, sedan, wheel, you're going to want these to a 1.00, and you're going to set basically everything that's in here. You're going to want to set it to a 100% chance. That way your cars will be spawning completely fully built. If you want to keep them vanilla, then you just basically keep them at the vanilla values. So if you find a car, it might need a tire, it might need a radiator or a spark plug, whatever the case may be. But if you want your cars fully loaded and fully built, then under each one, you're going to want to set the chances to all 100%. And then that will guarantee you a fully built vehicle. Full disclaimer, if you're going to make these changes, you're going to have to wait for the CE to eventually get rid of the old vehicles and start spawning in new vehicles. If you want anything to take effect immediately, you would need to do a wipe. So I just wanted to put that full disclaimer out there. And that's basically what the spawnable types is. Underground triggers is pretty much what it sounds like. If you want an area to be dark, if you build a custom area inside of editor and you want that area to be dark, well, then you're going to have to add an underground trigger. So all this does is this makes the area go pitch black or darker as it, as you go. So as you can see, this eye accommodation is slowly but surely going less and less and less. That's because you're going deeper and deeper into the area, and it's getting darker and darker as you progress. If you want it to just be flat out dark, you do not need this eye accommodation area. You would essentially just grab this position. This is all a JSON file, so be careful in here. You have to, do it correctly. So this right here, as you can see, we have a new one that says position. So if I was to copy this one and come like this, well, I now have a new entry in it. Let's make this a little bit bigger. I now have a new entry, and you would have to come through here. Let's find our position again, which is, let's come on down right here. We would change our coordinates to where we want it. We have an orientation, we have a size. Okay. So this is the height. This is the width. This is the length. So keep that in mind. Your size is like another big circle, but it also has a height on it. So if you want to do it to where you're slowly but surely walking into an area and it's getting darker as you go, you would do these eye accommodations. If you want to just walk into it and it's just freaking pitch black, then you don't need this eye accommodation whatsoever. But your underground triggers basically controls where your map is dark. CFGWeather is pretty self-explanatory. This is how you can control how much overcast, fog, and rain is on your map. If you want it to be raining more, then you would basically set your thresholds. Your limits. You would want it to basically be more rain than not, or actually what's all based on your overcast values. So if you come down here to your, to your rain, your threshold. So what are the range of the overcast values to allow the rain to be present? It's at a min and a max of a 1.0. So if you wanted to rain more, you would set this to like a 0.2. So this means at 20% overcast, it's going to be raining. I wouldn't recommend doing that, but that's how you can change that. Same thing with your storm density. So if you want your storm density to where it's like super, super lightning and thundering and all of that crap, as you can see, the threshold is 0.98. So you need 98%. You would need 98% overcast for it to actually turn into like a straight up thunderstorm. If you wanted that to happen at 70% overcast, then you would change it right here and you would just make this 70. Coming into our overcast, If you don't want it to ever get super cloudy and ugly like that, you have your change limits. So how much should the overcast change? Well, and then you also have right here is your range. So as you can see, we want to go from 0% overcast to 1.0. And then up here we have 0.07, which is 7% overcast, up to a 1%, which is 100%. So say we want our overcast to always be a minimum of 0.20%. That means regardless, you will always have 20% overcast as your absolute minimum. If you want it to ever be a chance where you could have like no overcast whatsoever, then you would just set it to 0.0. Say you never wanted your overcast to go over 50%. You would set this to a 0.50. This means your overcast it could be a perfect 0, but it will never go over 50%. Be very mindful when you're changing this. This file can be very, very tricky. It can be done on both console and PC, of course. It could be a very tricky file. You could really mess your weather up like big time. You could have thunderstorms when the sun's shining and it's a beautiful birds chirping day. So just be careful with this file. Your init file. So this is PC only. This basically controls what your characters start with on their spawn. If you want to come in here and you want to add spawn items, this is how you do it. Essentially, you would just come here. You would basically grab this guy right here, come down to your legs, set it there. So now he's spawning here. We can get rid of this one. So now he's spawning with a bandage dressing. If we want to do it again, and we want to change this to a tuna can, well, now he's going to spawn with an additional bandage and an additional tuna can, so on and so forth. Your player gets stats, water, and energy. So this is your water when you start at 750. This is your food when you start at 1000. If you wanted to start with full apples, you would set both of these to 5000. And your new characters would spawn with full food, full water. Or if you want to make it more hardcore, you set this to like 150 and like 500, and your guy's going to be like red apple, red water, just starting off, which I don't know why you would want to do that. And then you have your temporary resistance to influenza. So this is done in a seconds value. So 900 seconds. If you want, a much longer time, say you wanted this 1800 seconds, this means as a fresh player, whenever you first spawn in, the first 1800 seconds of your life, your guy will not be able to catch the flu. If you want to make it, only 60 seconds, so the first minute of his life, if you want to go like more hard, that's how you would change that. Map cluster, you're not going to ever mess with these. These files basically control the spawn points of the mushrooms, the fruits, and all of that. So your MapGroupPOS, we've talked about this file in other videos before. This basically tells the server to spawn loot in this building. So this building, the group name, this is a land boat small. This is where it is. This is its rotation. All this is going to do is tell the loot what building needs loot. So for instance, say this boat right here, I don't know where this boat is on the map, but if we didn't want this boat to have loot whatsoever, we would just delete it from this file. And now that boat will not have loot. So if you were to ever build custom areas and you wanted those custom areas to spawn the correct loot, you would actually have to put those buildings inside of your MapGroupPOS. But that's what this file does. This file just tells the server, hey, we have a land workshop. Here's the position. Here's its rotation. That building needs loot. And it fills its loot. But this file bounces off of the MapGroupProto, which we're going to go into next. This one is going to dictate what loot the building gets. So for instance, we have a land shed 1. Right now it's usage names. So this is basically, if you go based off the type files, the usage names for the land shed M1 is industrial and in farm. Well, if we wanted to change it from industrial to make it military, And we wanted this to change this to say contaminated area. So contaminated area. Gotta spell it right. Now the land shed M1 is going to spawn military loot, and it's going to put gas loot inside of it. Does that make sense? Put this back to where it was. If we wanted this to say village, we could add village to it. Or, oops. Or what we could do is we could copy this like so, and then just add a village tag. So now village loot could also spawn inside the land shed M1. So now we come down here to the loot floor. So here's your loot max. So as you can see, there's 3 loot positions inside this building. If we wanted all 3 loot positions to be taken up, then we would do loot max 3. This means you would have a chance to have 3 pieces of gear inside that building. If we wanted to only have 1, we only wanted a chance to have 1 piece of loot spawn in this building, well, then you set your loot max to just 1. Now here's your categories. So tools and containers can spawn. Well, say you wanted weapons in here. So let's just add weapons. Well, now the land shed M1 will have a chance to spawn weapons as long as you have it set as a village loot. So say you have an IJ set to village, it's set to weapons. Well, now we come right in here. If we set it like this, we add weapons to it. Well, now this shed will have a chance to spawn an MJ. And that's pretty much what this file does. Say that what I have found, whoops, let's Control F, these tenement buildings. So you see how these tenement buildings by default don't have any loot in them whatsoever. So land tenement small, loot max is 0. Let's go ahead and just copy this. Let's go over to the Chinaris file. Oops, I didn't mean to go into that. Come into the MapGroupProto. As you can see, these ones don't have any loot either. If you wanted to add loot to these buildings, you totally can, but you're going to need loot positions. Now, if I'm not mistaken, I think the Enoch ones by default have loot in them. Let's check. Okay, so by default, the Livonia ones have loot. So say you're playing a Chinaris server and you wanted loot inside of your apartment buildings on Chinaris, which I know Vibor's got some apartment buildings and whatnot. So all you would need to do is just copy these ones here, like so. We're going to go back to our Chinaris one. Let's go to our MapGroupProto. Control F to find. Oh, son of a gun. Let's close out of this real quick. I forgot that I had something copied. So Control F, let's do tenement building. Here's a small. We're going to come like so, and then we're just going to paste it. So now our small apartment buildings on Chinaris will have loot. Well, as you can see how many loot spots they actually have. Well, this only has loot max 10. So say we wanted to bump that up. Let's put it to 25. So now 25 of these loot spots will actually have loot in them. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. There's 11 loot spots for loot food. So let's set it to the max. Well, now every single loot spot that can happen will be filled with loot here. Same thing with weapons. You could increase this. If you wanted your big apartment buildings to have loot, well, then you're going to have to go in and you're going to have to set loot positions for those buildings, which is kind of dumb how Chinaris doesn't have the big ones done by default, but it is what it is. Me personally, I don't like loot inside the apartment buildings. I just can't be bothered to waste the time to even go through those damn big buildings. But that's what the MapGroupProto does. The MapGroupProto shows you how much loot is in a building and what loot the building actually has. So for instance, this land city stand grocery just has town loot. We'll say we wanted to have village loot as well. We add the village tag to it. As you can see, it's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 positions that it could spawn. Bump this to 6. Now every single position can be filled with loot. So on and so forth. Same with weapons. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There's 8 spots for weapons here. Let's change that to 8. So now all of these 8, all of these spots can be filled with weapons. And that's basically what the MapGroupProto does. It controls what buildings have what loot and how much loot. Moving into the database files, at this point, everyone should really know what these are, but I'm going to go over them anyways in case you're just absolutely brand new. You will never need to edit your economy file. You'll never need to. The only thing this file controls is if you want to save your dynamic loots, if you want to save your animals, your zombies, your vehicles. So if on every restart, if you wanted the vehicles to go away, then you would just set this to a 0. So that means on every time your server restarts, all of the vehicles get reset. It's good for servers that have like no bases. So that way, if you find a car, you get it running on the server restart, you lose your car. Would I ever do this? Absolutely not. But if you wanted to, that's what this is about. Same thing with building and same thing with players. If you wanted every single time your character came on, if you wanted a new character, you would just save your character to 0. So on and so forth. Events are pretty self-explanatory. The ambient animals you do not touch. You don't give them a nominal for it. Besides the hens are completely fine. Bump the hens up to 30, and you'll have up to 30 chicken spawns. The bears by default are set to 0. So if we set this to 10, if we set our nominal to 10, well, our min and our max is still only 2. So we're going to have to bump this up. So let's just say there's going to be a minimum of 8 bears on the map with a maximum of 10 bears on the map. So this, now that our nominal is 10, it can go up to 10, but we have to adjust our minimum and our maximum to actually match this number. Say you wanted bear packs. Okay. Well, as of right now, you see the child line. This is the animal that it actually spawns, the animal Ursus arctos. Well, and it only spawns a maximum of 1 bear and a minimum of 1. Well, say we wanted a chance for it to spawn 5 bears in a pack. Well, you just set your max to 5, your minimum to 1. That way there's always at least 1 bear, but there can be up to 5 bears. If you wanted it to always be 5 bears, you would set your min and your max to 5. That way, every time a bear spawns, you're going to have a pack of 5 bears. Would I recommend doing that? On a hardcore server, maybe. One of those like PvE servers with crazy guns and stuff. On a normal server, absolutely not. I would not recommend doing that. Another really good thing to do is, say you want your bears, you want them up by your town, and you don't know how to change the territory levels. So what you do is you say, okay, you know what? I want these bears. I want them to spawn where the cows spawn. So you just replace it. Set this to a 1. You would basically, get rid of these. And now wherever your cow territories are, it'll spawn a bear. But I wouldn't recommend doing that. Or like, for instance, for the deers. So say, wherever the deers spawn, you want to add, bears to that. Well, then you would just change that to a bear. So now your deer spawns will actually, they'll have bears there as well. I don't know why you would want to do that, but if you wanted to do that, you totally could. The wolves, same thing. So say we want a shit ton of wolves on our map. So we're going to set our nominal to 25. We'll set this to, we'll set this to 20 and we'll set this to 25, not 256. Jeez Louise. Now, if you look at your child line, you have your gray wolves and your white wolves. They come in packs. So you could have a maximum of 6, but there's going to be a minimum of 2 gray wolves. Then there's going to be a maximum of 4, but a minimum of 0 wolves. So this is what this does right here. This is going to say, okay, so if we come up onto here, we see our wolf spawns. Here's a wolf spawn right here. This is going to say, out of the possible amount of wolf spawns we have, 25 of them will be active. If you want to increase the amount of wolves that are actually coming at you, it's done on your child line. So say we set this to, I don't know why you would want to do this, but 20 and 20. Well, now, whenever you hear those howls, you're going to have 20 wolves coming at you at one time. That's a lot. I don't know why you'd want to do that. As far as the zombies go, you don't want to really change this around whatsoever, unless The only thing that I would recommend, or like if you were ever wanted to change this, is for instance, your industrial type zombies, or say, I don't know, like your NBC zombies. If you wanted your NBC zombies to also be spawning in with your military zombies, well, then you would just add that line. So now your military zombies will have a chance to spawn the NBC zombies as well. That makes sense? Coming down to blump, blump, blump. Let's see here. Go to our heli crashes. So our heli crashes. This tells us that we have 3 helicopter crashes on the map at any time. Well, let's bump this to 8. Let's set this to 3, and then we'll set this to 8. So at any time, we're going to have a minimum of 3 helicopter crashes on the map, but we can go up to 8 helicopter crashes on the map. So that's what these min, max, and the nominals are. Convoys are the same way. So the nominal is set to 5. The min and the max is both set to 0. So there could be none on there whatsoever. So I would change this to like 3 and a 5. That way you have a minimum of 3 convoys going at one time and a maximum of 5. Same thing with the police cars, the Santa crashes, the train crashes, the whole 9. And that's what your events file is. Globals, there's a lot of things that you can change in here. A lot of things. So your food decay. Let's just go in a line here. Your animal max count. You can have up to 200 animals on the map at any time. If you want to increase this, double it, you go to 400. Keep in mind, increasing the amount of animals that are on your map is going to increase the lag on your server. Cleanup avoidance, you just leave that alone. Clean up a lifetime dead animal, by default it's 1200 seconds. So after 1200 seconds, if you haven't skinned the animal, it will just despawn. Clean up lifetime dead infected is by default is 330 seconds. So once you go out of its little range, after 330 seconds, which is like a little over 5 minutes, they just disappear. Dead players by default is 1 hour. If you want this to be, I don't know, let's just say 2 minutes. After you kill a guy, 2 minutes later, his body disappears. Set this to 120 seconds. The lifetime default, you just kind of keep this, just keep this the way it is. Clean up lifetime ruined. So if you drop a ruined item on the ground, after 330 seconds, it's going to go away. Your flag refresh frequency. This is basically how often does your flag go down 1 level. But as you know, by default, a flag is like what, 40 days or something like that. Or hell, it might even be less than that. But every 43, 2000, these seconds, it's going to go down 1 level. If you want to increase that number, you can, or if you want to lower that number, you can. Food decay. This will tell you if your food spoils or not. If you want it to spoil, you keep it a 1. If you don't want your food to go bad at all, you just keep it at a 0. So the idle mode countdown, this one right here, it's by default 60 seconds. So if there's nobody playing on your server, 60 seconds after the last guy logs off, your server basically goes into a shutdown mode to where the economy just stops working. So all of your flag timers stop, your loot stops spawning, like everything basically stops. If you were to set this to 600 seconds, well, now it lasts for 10 minutes after, and it, loot timers, everything just kind of keeps going. If you were to set this to like 60,000, well, you do the math, what 60,000 seconds is. Well, here, let's just do this. 84,000 seconds is 1 day. So if you do this, this means for 24 hours, the server is going to keep going. So it's going to keep refreshing your loot. It's going to spoil whatever food you have in your inventory, all of that nonsense. So you want to be careful with this. If you have a very, very low pop server, sometimes it's best to set this number higher. That way the loot is constantly kind of like refreshing for you whenever you come back into your server. But if you have a very highly populated server, you really don't need to worry about this number, and you can probably keep it closer to like 600 seconds or so. The initial spawn is how much loot is spawned on the server startup. You always want to keep this at 100. This is what they've done to the spawnable types, with everything spawning pretty much damn broken, which is really annoying. So if you don't like this and you want things to go back to the way they were before, where, you know, boots and stuff pretty much spawn pristine, your bandages are pristine, your bullets are pristine, all that kind of stuff, your type, you would just set this to 0. Like so. Set this to 0. This will no longer work anymore. Basically, this is obsolete. But if you want to just change the damage values itself, so your loot damage max and your loot damage min, well, you would just kind of bring this down some. Bring it to like a 0.70, bring this up a little bit. And then you can basically play around with, like I would set this to like a 0.03, because that's what, you know, that was by default. This is what the old spawnable types used to be. So that right there controls all of the loot, the damage values of the loot on your server. Proxy placement, you don't want to play with any of this. You really don't want to play around with a whole lot of this. Your time to log in. So this is your login. Whenever you actually click and you're connecting to the server, it'll say, you know, 15 seconds to log in. You don't really want to change this to, I've seen some servers that have it at 5 seconds. In doing so, whenever you actually like log into the server, sometimes what it will create is your character will log into the server before the server is like fully loaded. So you'll be able to like see through walls and stuff. I don't think you really want to, change this too much. Just keep it at 15. And then your logout time, whenever you sit down to log out, some servers have this at 25 seconds. I've seen some servers have this at 60 seconds, but this is how long it takes, how long your character is sitting on the server for you to actually log out. I just keep mine at 15. And then the world wet item update. If you don't want like your items to get wet whatsoever, you set this to a 1, or you just kind of keep this as a 0. Then of course you have your zombie max count, 1000. I really wouldn't change this because this could really cause a lot of lag. And then your zone spawn distance. So by default, it's 300 meters. So whenever you approach an area, once you get within 300 meters, it starts spawning zombies, it starts spawning animals, all of that kind of good stuff. If you wanted to kick this out to 600 meters, you could do so. Or if you wanted to kick it down to like 150, half the distance, it just makes it so you have to get a little bit closer before stuff actually starts spawning in the area that you're at. Messages. The only person who needs to really play around with this is basically set on a console server. So console servers, you will need to change this. By default, these are commented out. So if we remove these 2 lines right here, these will actually work again. This is basically your message shutdown. This is your shutdown message. So basically every 600 seconds, the server shuts down. This is the message will, you know, be displayed every 15 minutes to the player. You can change whatever you want right here. But like I said, if you're on a PC server, you're not going to want to use this shit whatsoever. You're going to want to use like CF tools or battle metrics. You're going to use a third-party software to handle your messages and your server restarts, because this is just absolute garbage. Essentially, with a 600-second shutdown, I think that's what, 2 hours or maybe long. I don't know. I don't know math. I can't math right now. But essentially, whenever you turn your server on, that's when it starts counting down till its next shutdown. You don't want that. You don't want that. You want it to, you want your server restarts and your server shutdowns to be the same time every time. And using this, it's just not going to be that way. And then of course the types files. Everybody knows the types files. There's a few things in here that we could go over that most people maybe don't know. Deloot. So what this means is it's going to spawn on an event. So the AK-101 by default in Chernarus is set to helicopter loot. If you didn't want that to be helicopter loot, you would set this to a 0 and you would just add a tier to it. So we come here, we go like that. Now our AK-101s are going to be spawning in a tier 3 and a tier 4, and they're not going to be on a helicopter. The only other thing that we can go through with this is when it comes to like magazines. So if we come to this mag 1911, the quant min and the quant max, it's done by whole percentages. So 20%, 100%. If we want our magazines to always spawn full, we're going to set both of these values to a -1. That means every single time you find a 1911 mag, it's going to have 7 rounds in it. If you want this to either have 10% rounds and then maybe 50% rounds, well, we'd have to, yeah, 50%. So you're either going to have, you know, 1 bullet in it, or, you know, what's 50% of 7, you know, they'll have 3 or 4 rounds in it, so on and so forth. It'll be easier to do like a 30 round mag. So 5% up to 50%. So you could have up to 15 rounds in this. If you wanted to bump this to 75% and 25%, well, now you're either going to have, you know, what, 7 rounds up to a maximum of what, 21 rounds, something like that. You know, it's just done with your math. But like I said, if you want your mags to spawn full, you just set these both to -1, and then they'll always spawn full. Again, I don't know why these AK-101s are set to helicopters. I would turn that off and then just have it spawn in you know, the military areas. Now, if you wanted it to just spawn in military all across the board, you just have your usage name military, and you don't assign a tier to it. That's all you got to do. You just don't assign a tier. Count in cargo means this will count if it's inside of a tent or something like that. Count in hoarder means if it's counted inside of like buried storage. Counting in map means it's only counting the values that are actually on the map itself. And then count in player means it's also counting whatever's in somebody's inventory. So by default, these mags are set to only count in map. But if I was to set this to 1 and this to 1, come on now. That means out of this nominal of 25, it's going to count the ones that are in people's tents, the ones that are on the map, and the ones that are in players' inventories. So say if there's a lot of people on your server and all 25 of those are picked up, you know, and they're in players' inventories and in tents, then none of them are going to spawn on the map. So I really don't recommend playing around with this unless you have an item that's like supposedly, you know, like rare, like say you only want, you know, 1 or 2 DMRs on the map and you want them to count if someone's holding them, then you would, you know, set that to count in player, set this to 2, set your, you know, your minimum to 1. And then basically if someone's holding it, it's going to count that in his hand as part of the economy, if that makes any sense. And that's pretty much it when it comes to the type files. The type files, everyone should really know how to do this, you know, how to change things around. For instance, say, you know, your mag, your Mark II round, if you want this to also be spawning in military areas, well, then you would just add another usage flag and call it military. So now the mag Mark II 10 round clip will also spawn. So it's going to spawn in town, village, and it's also going to spawn in military areas now. Same thing with like the M4A1 by default. Whoops. Gosh darn it. I keep hitting the. So by default, the M4A1 is set to contaminated areas. Well, if we don't want it at a contaminated area, so we're just going to set this to military, and we're going to set this to D-loot. Come on. There we go. Well, now your M4s are no longer going to spawn in the gas zone. They're going to spawn on helicopters. Let's say you don't want them in the gas zone, then you don't want them on the helicopters. You just want them at Tizzy. Well, then what we need to do is come down here where I can, like this, grab a tier 4. We are in Chinars, right? Yeah, Chinars. So Tizzy would be tier 4. Let's come back to our M4 right here. And we're going to go just like that. But we're also going to add this usage tag, military. Copy that. And bam. So, oh, what am I doing? Oh, I put this on the wrong one. Duh. There you go. So now your M4s are going to spawn on the map. There's only one of them, and they're going to spawn in the military at Tizzy. So that's basically how you just kind of play around with your types files. can be everything here can be very tricky to balance. This is basically where you balance the loot that's actually on your server. And that's pretty much it. That's every file that there is to know about a DayZ server. So I know this was a really long video. I have no idea how long it actually was. We're about to find out, but hopefully this helped you guys kind of understand and give a breakdown of each file and what they do and how to change them. If it did help, thumbs up would be greatly appreciated. Make sure you guys drop a subscription. If there's anything you want me to go more in depth about, just leave a comment and let me know. And I don't mind helping out one bit. So I love all your faces. And I hope you guys enjoy the rest of your day. Love you, bye.